Pleasant good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another segment of the discussions on the Tobago Autonomy bills hosted by the Tobago Civil Net organization. Last night, our discussions focused on Bill number 1 and was moderated by our very own Deborah Moore Miggins. This evening, I am your host, Dr. Denise Tsoiafatt-Angus, and I am joined by our panelists. We have Dr. Vanus James, who I know needs no introduction to our community. We have returning with us Dr. Winford James, and also returning Clyde Weatherhead. Welcome to my esteemed panelists.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good night, Dr. Denise.
Good.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angus.
This is quite a surprise. We're getting presiding officer skills here tonight.
Well, you know, some of the other more experienced moderators were not available, so they asked me to fill in. But I must express apologies for another panelist who was invited to be here, Mr. Ho-Choi Charles. Unfortunately, the timing, he was unable to attend. I know that he said he would attempt to drop in at some point if he can, and if he does, we will give him an opportunity to speak.
What about Mr. Hines?
Mr. Hines? Oh, we didn't get any further responses from Mr. Hines.
Because I understand that he wanted to be on the panel.
Yes.
This would have been an excellent opportunity.
We didn't get any further confirmation, but if he does pop in as part of the audience, we more than welcome, will be willing to give him the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
Earlier today, you know, I have been contacted by a number of persons with varying requests concerning, you know, tonight's activity. Some persons felt that they were still confused about the first bill, given the complex terminology that we have as part of that document. And of course it's a bill. Others agreed with many of the points stated last night, but wanted a way to use it, wanted a way to find ways to amend the bill and still get it approved. Perhaps given the fact that the Joint Select Committee is here doing consultations and seeking comments, it's perhaps an opportunity to satisfy everyone with that approach. So tonight I want to begin by perhaps doing a recap, a very quick recap from last night. I know that we got comments from both Dr. James and Mr. Weatherhead and myself, but of course, Dr. Vanus was not there with us. So I have asked them to see whether they can share the SurveyMonkey screen to give it a more interactive feel for persons out there who are, you know, looking for the answers to see if they can complete that survey. While they are doing that in terms of getting it on screen, I would like to get your views. Let's start with question number 4. Do you agree with the proposal to grant internal self-government to Tobago? Dr. Vanus, what do you think? Do you agree at all that we should be granted?
Of course, that is a 137-year-old search by the people of Tobago. So I am in line. I'm in year 138.
Okay, very good.
On track. I'm fully in agreement with self-determination for Tobago.
Okay. And I am assuming that the other panelists, that you may be on board with it. Let's go to Mr. Weatherhead.
Yes, sure. The
Yes.
notion of self-determination for Tobago has been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we spoke about that, and of course, Dr. James.
Short answer is yes, Miss Denise.
Okay. All right. So I will go to Mr. Weatherhead because I know you had concerns last night about the preamble in clause 4 and perhaps 5, when the preamble spoke to including the right of the people of Tobago to determine their political status, etc. Could you share with us some more on that?
Okay, well, that is in connection as well with the first statement in clause 5 that speaks of the equality of status between the island of Tobago and the island of Trinidad. Now, if there's equality of status between the two islands, the bill as it went to Parliament and the 2020, let me just clarify from last night. Remember, the bill went as 2018, and Parliament would have changed in 2020. So it would have been resubmitted to Parliament in practical terms in 2020.
Okay.
The constitutional bill. So where it speaks of equality of status between the two islands, the suggestion that came out of several teams and commissions in Tobago over the years of a federal structure would seem to me to be most appropriate. Now, if you have equal status between the two islands and you develop the next part, which says the right of self-determination of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and then it goes on, including the right of the people of Tobago to determine in Tobago. So. If you have equality of status between the two islands, and you are saying one will then have a particular right to self-determination to determine things in that island, are we then saying that the other island doesn't have the same? And that is why, to me, the federal structure which was being proposed in Tobago may be most appropriate, recognizing that you have two islands who should be equal in status according to the provisions of this bill, and therefore should have equal rights to determine for themselves what they need to determine on each island.
Okay.
In other terms, you could substitute the word nation for island, because Tobago, in my view, is a nation with a land space, an economy, a history, a culture, and language all its own.
Agreed. Definitely. Culture and language all on its own. So I'm to assume that you don't agree at all with that, with the statement in the clause 4 and 5.
Well, I don't agree with it as long as they move away from a federal structure into what they have put in the rest of the bill.
Dr. Varnas, what's your take on that?
Well, I'm in line with Clyde, but I will remind him of the history of this issue. For 134 years, we have had Trinidad assume the right to self-determination, and the questions about self-determination were questions for Tobago. But generally, I agree with the tenor of Clyde's comments, which is that whatever provisions you have for one, we're half and half. We're half the country, you half the country. Whatever provisions you put in for Tobago should be put in for Trinidad. You should define, Trinidad should be defined without boundaries, the same way Tobago should be defined without boundaries, if that's what we want to do. And then we make a federal government that will take responsibility for everything else. That sort of thing. I'm fully in line with what Clyde is saying.
Okay. All right. And Dr. Winford.
Yes.
Do you have anything to add to Clyde's statement on that?
No, I think it was pretty straightforward. And
All
I
right.
agree with essentially his sentiments, so nothing to add.
All right, as we lean in, Dr. Vanna spoke about the definition of Tobago, which is in clause 6, and I note that they did not put that in the questionnaire for discussions. They just assumed that it will be accepted. And the definition of Tobago, it says here, Tobago is the island of Tobago, Little Tobago, St. Giles Island, Marble Island, Goat Island, Sisters Island, and the internal and inland waters of Tobago. So from this, it looks like Tobago just owns rivers. Someone said to me earlier today that, you know, you almost could imagine that you will go to Store Bay, and as you put your toe in the water, you're in Trinidad waters. So let me hear from you, Dr. Winford, on that one.
That person was being facetious. Yes, it seems to me that if you're talking about boundaries at all, remember that the new bill is not talking about boundaries. There are boundaries set out in the current House of Assembly bill, right? House of Assembly Act. Now, but the bills that have been presented by the JSC do not mention boundaries. And the question that arises is whether the JSC sees Trinidad and Tobago as one indivisible country with boundaries in relation to foreign states, but not in relation to constituent islands of the territory we call Trinidad and Tobago. In fact, a minister of government texted me to say that the reason why Shamfa Kojo shifted from the need to have the same kinds of treatment for both islands to accepting that there be no boundaries stipulated is that according to international law, you can't have a constituent island having boundaries or constituent islands having boundaries. Now that was said to me not in those words, but in essence. So from their standpoint, Tobago does not have maritime boundaries, right? And they didn't go on to say this, but I imagine, just as Vanessa was hinting, that they might have gone on to say Trinidad doesn't have boundaries either, but that Trinidad and Tobago have boundaries. So that when we speak of boundaries, we are speaking of boundaries in relation to the state called Trinidad and Tobago. So that's an interesting point. And as you just pointed out, I haven't read the Survey Monkey, so, but I take your observation that they don't ask a question about it. And that is, to my mind, escapist, because clearly they need to address that issue. Now, the law of the sea talks about the median line, determining boundaries between states that have adjacent borders and territories and so on. But the interpretation is that, well, you cannot give Tobago.
Like that, the house breaking and lessons. The sentences are to be served concurrently.
Someone has their mic unmuted.
Oh,
Okay.
because I
Go
thought
ahead,
I had been pushed off the air. May I continue, Chairman?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I was saying I had to look up the law of the sea and so on. I mean, you know, when different ideas arise in your space, you tend to check them out, Dr. Angus, to see where you have gone wrong and whether your understanding and your knowledge need to be improved. And they do talk about the median line between two states. And that is why those of us who propose a federal state, a federal government, have been thinking of separate states. That is to say, Tobago is a separate state from Trinidad, which is also a separate state. So that if we should pursue the question of a federal arrangement, in that arrangement, you cannot escape the question of boundaries for the particular states in the federation. And I believe this is deliberate on the part of the government to not, or to hint, and I believe they will make a little more noise about it as time goes on, to hint that Trinidad and Tobago is one unitary state, and therefore you cannot speak of boundaries for the constituent states.
But there's something in law that speaks to precedents being set. And if we were given 6 miles before, precedents was set where we were given borders. And so why not just continue or widen those borders? Dr. Vanas, what say you? What would you say to that?
Well, I think there is, I would be subject to correction by Clyde, but I think there is a certain kind of and maybe deliberate misinterpretation of what the law of the sea is about. This is about relationships between nation states. So you're talking here about the boundary between Trinidad and Tobago and Barbados, for example. But once the nation of Trinidad and Tobago is defined, you can draw boundaries for any portion of it you want, including the Tobago portion. And you will see an expression of that in the way Hawaii, for example, is defined in relation to the United States of America. So the idea that because you are an island means relative to, say, a state of which you are a part, there can be no boundaries for you, is falsified by that particular example I'm giving you here. And the general principle is, you have a nation called Trinidad and Tobago, it has boundaries, inclusive of the 12-mile exclusive zone, and then the economic geography that goes to, out to the 200-mile limits and all that sort of stuff. Once the nation is defined in relation to that baseline set of facts, you can go in there and you could say, this portion is what we are going to call Tobago for purposes of our administrative of our island, of our country. That's the first important observation to be made. And you make divisions between segments of the country to allow for administrative, local law jurisdiction and other things like that, and for budgetary allocations. You make those boundary definitions to suit. So if you look in the US at the way allocations are made to states, allocations within states are made through the definition of the boundaries within the states of districts and boroughs and so on. You will see that is helpful in defining budgets. And so there's no way to say we can't do boundaries for Tobago at all.
Thank you, Doc. I know that we have someone in the waiting room with a question or a comment. Could we let them in, please?
His mic is muted.
No, well,
hello.
There's someone in the waiting room, but I don't think that person has a question or comment. I just was highlighting the fact that they were in the waiting room. I do have a comment though, and that's separate from the person. I am so glad that Mr. Clyde brought up the idea of a federal union. And I joined you guys a bit late, but I want to point out that I'm so glad for that. And the reason I am so glad for that is because the changes that we want here in Tobago, where we want to become more autonomous, in contrast to less autonomous, it's only going to happen if the rest of society here in Tobago is on board. And they're only going to be on board if what we are asking for is simplified in the simplest language possible, A, and B, not only is it simplified, but it is something they can relate to. Now, in terms of setting a precedent, we have already, all of us who have ever said the Trinidad and Tobago national anthem, we have already agreed to a federal union. And what I mean by that, there's a line in the Trinidad and Tobago national anthem that says, side by side we stand. And we know that the Trinidad and Tobago national anthem that we use today was written originally for the Federation of the West Indies. Now, considering that reality, you have that familiarity, and also when you tell somebody, a man on the street, that what we're looking at is something federal, and he says, can you please explain that there are other federal unions in the world that are commonplace that we could point out to, like the United States, like Canada, I believe Australia falls into the same bracket. My question though would be, everything we're discussing, we're talking more or less about asking central government for this or for that. Is it at all possible that we could usurp some of that authority that we give to central government and make a statement in contrast to our request? I'd like to
Okay, caller. Okay,
that.
I will have Mr. Weatherhead. I will have you take that one.
Yeah, okay. Well, let me just tie in two other things with what he asked. The question of the definition of Tobago. The section was highlighted on the screen a little while ago. That's section 10 of the bill. And what it seeks, it describes Tobago as Tobago, these islands, and the internal and inland waters. Internal waters has a meaning in law in Trinidad and Tobago. There's an act called the Territorial Sea Act, chapter 151 of the laws of this country. And inland waters is defined in that act as the internal waters, of Trinidad and Tobago. And the internal waters refers to those waters that are on the landward side of the closing lines. What are the closing lines? Because last night, Ms. Tsoiafatt, you raised the issue of the harbor. The closing lines in the act are defined as straight lines drawn in accordance with the law of the sea arrangement convention, crossing the mouth of a river, enclosing a bay, or delimiting the waters of a harbor. So what this bill seeks to do is to move you from 6 miles going outward to restricting Tobago definition to within those lines, those closing lines. So that what is inland water, they haven't defined in the bill. So that's why I was asking, are there lakes in Tobago? Like the Granitang lake in Grenada, which is a volcanic lake. So what are inland waters? What exactly is that? Argyle Waterfall? What is it? So there's need for some clarification and definition in the act, because if they are interpreting inland waters in a different way, the definition in the Territorial Sea Act deals with Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. So there may be need for clarification on that, as well as what they mean by inland waters, right?
And
so
you,
the question of whether the person asked, pardon? The person asked whether you can make demands rather than suggestions and so on. Well, I think the fact when A.N.R. Robinson and they took that motion to the parliament back in the 70s, that was making a demand, and it forced the parliament to make certain things happen. But they have not moved further to satisfy what the people of Tobago actually want. So in every situation, this is going to be negotiated between Trinidad and Tobago and the parliament. And therefore, everybody has to have their voice, and the people of Tobago have spoken. And this Joint Select Committee took nearly 4 years, and then giving you 2 days to respond to the bill. That
Thanks,
is, our
Mr.
demand should
Weatherhead.
be, we need more time to look at
Thank
this.
you. But you know, as you brought up the point of the harbor, you're quite correct, because given the borders that we are now given or not given, it means that, you know, if we wanted to do an underwater marine park so that we can use the relics that we have lying underneath the harbor as some tourism product, does it mean that we have to ask permission central government to utilize our own spaces, which is well within the
But if
6
you go beyond
miles.
if you go beyond the closing lines, once you cross the closing lines, you are outside of Tobago, according to the
Which means that once you step off land. Okay. All right. So
pass a bay or the river mouth.
clause.
What we may ask is, if you're outside, if Tobago is outside those lines, where are we when we step over those lines?
In Trinidad, according to the definition.
in something that
So-
in law right now is called Trinidad and Tobago.
Okay. Anyway, so clause number 8 and 10 refer to the power to make laws. And even though the 4th schedule is mentioned, I want to leave the deep discussion of the 4th schedule to a little bit later. So clause 8 and 10 pretty much has to do with, do you agree that we should have lawmaking power and that we should, yes, do you agree that we should have lawmaking powers and lawmaking powers to the extent that it includes interests of external affairs, national security, state of public emergency, and national financial crisis? What do you think? And I think the language in there is pretty straightforward in terms of that clause. I say that we probably, I agree that we should be making laws. It's a long time we've been clamoring to be able to actually make laws, and not laws where we have to send it down to cabinet and it then has to go to parliament in order to complete the law. But a law that can be passed within the chamber and be assented directly by the president. And so really that is the clause that deals with, the power to make laws. Anybody has any comments in those areas?
I just want to point out. Let me defer to my brother there, Vanos.
May I just point out there quickly that there should be no debate in whether Tobago has to have, as part of its self-determination, the power to make laws. That should not be debatable at all. What should be considered is the jurisdiction. If we define what we want the central government for, and we say, okay, these are the things we want you to do for us, then what we as Tobagonians are saying is, you make the laws and define the policies with respect to those things we ask you to do for us. Everything else, anything we didn't ask you to do for us, we will reserve the right to make law that are applicable within the space that we are calling, the jurisdictional space that we are calling Tobago. They won't apply in Trinidad, but they will apply here. But let me make, Dr. Denise, may I make one point about the previous question that we were discussing, just to close that point with this matter of lawmaking. And that is that the people of Tobago enjoy human rights just like every other people, including the right to self-determination. And in that context, we are the ones who have to say what we want to operate within the context of anything we call the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not for Trinidadians to say what Tobagonians should want. It is Tobagonians who must lay out what we want. And that is why I would say that it is in the current jurisdiction, in the current dispensation, it is for the 12 reps we have to constitute the assembly and use their status as representatives of the people of Tobago to lay out exactly what we want our autonomy bill to look like.
Okay,
Well,
let me just add.
that would have been, really something that we should have. And I certainly hope that the doors are still open for discussions in terms of, being able to put forward a position on Tobago, or even reactivating the Tobago Autonomy Committee that they had that presented that first 2016 bill, but we must find a way to bring people together around the table so we can begin to speak with one voice in terms of where we want to go with Tobago's autonomy. It's the only way that we will get where we want to go.
Chair, permit me to go back to the 4th schedule, which confers upon Tobago the ability to make law in relation to a number of areas. One of those areas, of course, is lands. But you know, it is circumscribed. It's what they say is that Tobago can make law in relation to lands, but not lands vested in the state, not state lands. In the first place, they are the ones telling us the areas in which we must make law, not we ourselves. They are telling us, you see these areas here, you must make laws there. They are constricting us in relation to what we can do in terms of making law, and then turning around and telling us that this is autonomy.
Okay.
Look at the bold-facedness of that presentation. So I'm just saying here that we need to see in the 4th schedule and the 5th schedule. Let's go to the 5th schedule.
Okay.
If you have areas there that are listed, you have to come to the conclusion that the JSC is telling us that the areas that are not there are areas that we should not be. That's where the government will make law. That's what basically they're saying.
I do have concerns with the fact that, you know, and I spoke about it last night. And for those who are looking on, this is question 12 on your survey. We just jumped a little bit. The fact that on the 5th schedule, that administratively, we are not responsible for transportation. And right now, transportation is part of our portfolio. If we're not responsible for transportation, does that apply to our public bus service on the island? So we're not responsible for that, and we cannot administrate over that.
Self-determination,
Madam Moderator, I hate to interject, but there are a couple hands that are up, and
sorry,
persons are complaining that they're not able to get in. So I just wanted to interject that. That's okay.
How do I get them in? Or do we just allow them to speak?
Yes, so just when you see the hands up, you call on them, each person.
All right. So
yeah, Madam Chair, I have not finished making my presentation.
I want to give way to at least one question.
I don't mind giving away, but I think I must be allowed to complete an idea.
Okay.
Just like everybody else. But I'm going to yield again in this matter.
Remember, I gave way to you when I said we will discuss the schedules a little lower. But could we have at least one of the attendees? My apologies for not observing your hands up. Yes.
Hello. Hi, thank you very much, Dr. Angus. I'm sorry.
I'm okay with that too.
I always have trouble. I've actually tried to practice your name, but I still. But my name's Joanne John, and I'm just here as an observer and also somebody who has taken quite an interest in what is happening in Tobago. I recently returned to Tobago after many, many years abroad. As you can tell, I am Canadian, but I'm Trini born and I'm now Tobago resident. I am very interested in, I voted in the election. I was very seized with what was going on. I was, like everybody else, quite amazed at the 6-6 outcome, and certainly, want to see something move forward in a positive way that's going to help Tobago move forward. One of the things that I have to say, though, about some of these presentations that I have seen, my background is in communications and engagement. I spent many, many years in the federal public service in Canada. At quite a senior level, seized with how to engage the public in whatever it was that governments or politicians wanted to get across. And I'm a bit concerned that public engagement here is going to be lacking. I think that there's an assumption that everyone is on board with autonomy. And I think that's a dangerous assumption, that all Tobagonians are already there. It's a matter of bringing many Tobagonians, I'm sure, into that tent. And in order to do so, some very concrete things I think have to happen. One of them is, one of the previous speakers said it, and I think it was spot on, is that it has to be simplified. I understand legislation, I can read it, I understand regulations, and I can read clauses and all of that kind of stuff. And even that being said, either two things happen. Even though I'm understanding it, if the conversation about it is not speaking to me in a way that I'm getting engaged, becoming engaged, that I want to know more, that my questions are being answered, I am either falling asleep or I stop caring. And I think it's really important to simplify all of what this kind of discussions that's happening here about all these different aspects of the autonomy bill, which are hugely important. And a lot of the comments that have been made have been very good, but they have to be palatable, digestible, and understandable to everybody that you want to get into the tent. So I certainly want to say that. And maybe it's the forum, maybe it's the whole Zoom thing, and if there was a town hall, it might have gone differently. But unfortunately, I've attended a number of these things, and I find they always degenerate into this big academic conversation. You know, if that's where I wanted to go, I could have those conversations as well, but it's not really my interest. I'm interested in being clear, concise, accurate, timely in my conversations, and that it's opened up so that people can ask their questions and get their answers in a very succinct way. And unfortunately, that's not what I often hear. And I'm worried that all the good work that's being done and all the good work that's being proposed to be done might end up, like it's the old, like people will shoot themselves in the foot, and that's not what we really want to see happening. Is that we want things that will engage young people. This kind of thing that's going on here right now, that's essentially an academic discussion, isn't going to engage young people. I have a couple of millennials, and I can tell you that won't happen. Whether it's in Canada, it's in the US, it's in England, or wherever, or it's right here in Tobago, you lose young people with that. And you need young people to move Tobago forward. I think that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Ms. John. Thank you. So, Dr. Winford, and the rest of the panelists, we take the comments on board.
Yes.
And
the question.
You want to continue your completing your point?
Well, I can
concerning
complete
the
it,
fish.
but I can also comment on what Joy has just said. Let me start off with what Joy has said and to say to her that I welcome her appeal for messages to be cast in simple language. We try our best, and that is why we need to have people speak up in forums like this. We want to have them write in their concerns. We want them to talk with their representatives, with the representatives, of course, playing the role of clarificationists, if you wish, people who can make things clearer. So there is no unwillingness on the part of many of us who seek to engage with the public. The question is, we cannot simply assume that because we are talking sometimes in academic language that people do not understand. If people do not understand, we must see that they don't understand. They must tell us that they don't understand. And those of us who are engaged, as I said, will try our best to make matters a little simpler. So I take on board what she's saying, but there's a role for people to also insist that, I do not understand what has been said. I do not understand what the act is saying. There's a role for people to tell us.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Winford. Could we continue with, you want to close on your point?
I just wanted
because I want to give the other panelists some time.
I want to emphasize that if you have a schedule of areas where you are disallowed the power of making law, the obvious implication is that somebody else is making laws in those areas. And when you examine who that somebody is, it turns out that it's the cabinet and the government. And if you are talking Tobagonian autonomy, you cannot have that contradiction in the law.
Okay, thanks. Can I allow Mr. Brendan Gray to make a comment at this time? Mr. Gray, you have your hand up.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I, like John, want to say that I don't even need to talk about the bill. Having read it, we should call it a begging bill, that we are begging for something from Trinidad that they want to do for us. So we go to Trinidad and beg. It's a begging bill. It's not a bill. It's a begging document, rather. I feel, as the first gentleman that spoke, he said that we need to demand. I think it's time that we stop probating and saying, dissecting the bill, dissecting the document. Dissecting it, we know what it's saying, as Dr. James Winford James has just alluded. It's not autonomy. We came from 1980, then we got to 1996. And under 1996, it was a particular situation that existed why we got what we got in 1997. In 1996 was a 1717-2. And that 1717-2 brought about what we have now. What we have now is much better than what is proposed based on what some form of autonomy is. And I think this document that we are debating and speaking about should be considered a begging bill, a begging document. It is a begging document.
Thanks for your comment, Mr. Gray. But we have to take on board that there are many young persons out there who may not have been able to read the document as you have. And the Tobago Civil Net committed to lifting the awareness and being able to inform people as to what is in the bills. And therefore we have to thank the panelists that they agreed to come on as part of the education process for the general public. So, whilst we may get to that conclusion, we still have to take the opportunity to educate persons out there.
But Doc, you must understand that, I mean, I would like to participate. Yes, I'm trying to participate.
Yes.
In it, so if I'm given a time, and I would not be long, and I would not come on again. Yeah, I am very much disturbed. I am disturbed. I hear all that we are saying here, and we interpreting and we dissecting it as the case might be. But the point still remains, Doc, that if we cannot get to the bottom line and do the things that we ought to do to get what our rights are, nobody's going to give it to us. As this has said, they're not giving us anything. And we need to make some demands as to what we want again.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so since we were dealing with the schedules, we could probably just continue talking about the schedules, given the one in the fourth schedule. I know that in the previous submission in 2016, there was a recommendation that we be given areas of that Trinidad is is noted to have areas of responsibility, and then it will be said all other areas would belong to Tobago. I think that was as part of the administration for the 5th schedule. Now, what we got is the fact that we have been defined as to what Tobago is responsible for, and Trinidad will take care of the rest. Now, I was bringing up the point that transportation is one of those that is a key area which is missing from the 5th schedule. Any comments on that?
Well, the things with the schedules is one thing. The lawmaking authority, and they had shown the section a little earlier. The question about it is not whether you should have lawmaking authority in Tobago. The question is, what are the boundaries? And those boundaries are set in the bill by several things. One is the schedules in terms of areas of responsibility. And the other is as the bill in clause 9 and so on says, that you can't deal with things that are contrary to the constitution of the country, that you can't deal with things that are contrary to an existing law, and things like that. So the question of the boundaries is what anybody who wants to comment on the question of the lawmaking rights has to look at what are the boundaries of that lawmaking right, both in terms of the schedule and in terms of those conditions. Because if, as it says, if something in a Tobago Act is inconsistent with an existing law, then that law is only valid to the point that it is consistent. So, and who is going to decide that? Eventually, you'll have to go to a court to decide that. So
Okay.
the question of the boundaries is where the issues will come up.
Okay. Dr. Panas?
My position on this business of these schedules was stated just a while ago. And quite apart from the ridiculous nature of the 4th and the 5th schedules, one being where we can make law subject to what Clyde just said, and the other where the government makes policy and law and Tobago administers. That construct for me, I like what Winford was saying, that construct is inconsistent with self-determination. What I think Tobagonians must be clear on, thanks to what Joanne was pointing out, if I could be as clear as possible, what Tobagonians ought to be clear about is that if you're talking self-determination, the schedules any schedules in the Constitution must relate to what the central government is assigned. Or if it was a federal system, what the federal government is assigned. All reserved rights, all unscheduled rights would be for Tobago. And therefore, there should be no schedules, 4th, 5th, or otherwise. There should be no schedules for Tobago whatsoever. We should have a schedule for the central government. We want you to do these 10 things. And all the rest of the responsibilities are ours in Tobago. And that would be my way of talking to the people of Tobago about 4th and the 5th schedule.
Point well taken. I think that really explains.
Always.
Am I hearing? Okay. I want to read your Facebook comment. I thought quite interesting. It says, Tobago's reefs are a part of our coastal wetlands and would fall under our wetlands management systems if we had one. I'm still reading. How do we administer management strategies if the reef falls outside of our jurisdiction? The bill is anti-sustainability where Tobago's development is concerned. Anybody has a comment from
Just
the panel?
briefly,
And in fact,
if
I may, sorry, go ahead, Winford.
I was just saying, in answer to that question, that the bill doesn't talk about boundaries at all. So it allows us probably free movement. It allows the House of Assembly to palaver, if you wish, once, of course, the police doesn't come for them. Because the bill does not talk about boundaries except the internal and inland ones. But to talk of the inland and internal ones does not mean that you don't have rights to waters around the island. It's just that the bill is silent about those matters. But it is deliberately silent because the bill is probably trying to hide the intention of government to keep all the wealth to the central government, with Tobago going every year via the Secretary for Finance and the Economy to beg for more money than he will get, because he will only get 4.03. No government, no House of Assembly has got more than that. So that it is an attempt. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Dr. Denise, are you?
No, go ahead.
No, I was saying it's an attempt to keep Tobago away from management of its marine resources and leaving that up to the central government, which is in actual fact Trinidad, because of the way the parliament is structured.
Dr. Winford, I want to give Green Tobago Tours an opportunity to speak. They've had their hands raised for a bit.
That's okay.
Thanks.
Jason hand was raised before. Green.
Jason Green. Fraser.
Jason Fraser.
Okay. Jason Fraser. And then I will take Green Tobago Tours. Good night.
Yes, I'm happy to join in this discussion tonight. I wasn't in the one last night, but I was really hoping that we had more participation with young people, because when I checked the amount of people online here, this is a very good initiative by this group of people who pull this together. It's only 32 persons is the most I see online here tonight. And this discussion is very edifying for all Tobagonians, especially our young people. I'm suggesting that if you could continue this discussion, but find a way to market it, either social media, so that we could have a more wider cross-section of Tobago to be a part of it. And one more thing I want to say though, if you know the different nights, you could put what topic you are covering, so those who have interest could actually, log on to be able to have their contribution make. Because my interest basically is in sports, having equality in national selections and so forth. And I didn't really get a chance yet to read the draft bill. I only just picked it up today. So I'm not sure if anything like that has been addressed, because for years Tobagonians have suffered where that is concerned in having equality in selections for national teams. So if you all could continue this and actually, sectionize, like tonight we're going to touch on these 5 topics and so forth, because this is a very wide cross section that you are actually covering, and it's very, very good for all Tobagonians.
Just a brief intervention, Jason. Fraser, yes, and it is that we can't make law in relation to sport and cultural activities according to the bill.
Okay. So I guess we have to continue the way we are.
I don't know that.
Well, it begins with your participation on this forum, Jason. It begins with your participation on this forum, and we want to thank you for that comment. We would hope that the position paper that goes forward to the Joint Select Committee would also take some of these comments into consideration for submission. Let me take Green Tours first, Green Tobago Tours first, and then Dr. Vanas will take you. Green Tobago Tours. Okay, Dr. Vanas, go ahead.
Well, I was simply backing up what Winford was saying and responding to Jason. The central government reserves the right to make the rules in all the critical areas that we need to control to be able to compete with Trinidad and the world, including sports and education, all these critical areas. And what they do is they assign you in Tobago the responsibility to implement what they want you to do. And they call that autonomy. I mean, this is laughable if it wasn't so serious.
That's definitely not autonomy.
Okay. All right.
And Dr. Denise, may I also point out that I have not seen so much unanimity in Tobago as I have seen over this bill. Everybody I talked to agree that this bill should be comprehensively rejected. everybody. And this is just from John's point of view, this is just an academic discussion because people really kind of
Well,
make up their mind
I
already.
think
We don't want this.
people are being challenged. You know, on one hand, this is not what they wanted or expected. I think they expected more out of it, feeling that where we started out in 1996, that you know, it seems like we have not had an addition, but we have had exchanges, and I think people are very disappointed, you know, with that fact. However, persons are also looking at the number of years it took us to get to this point. So you have other persons who are saying, how can we, you know, the Joint Select Committees here, it must mean that they are here willing to listen to us again. And how can we impress upon them the pieces that we need to have in there, that we want to have in there, and, you know, and be able to still have something that doesn't take years again to develop. So I think that is the challenge persons are treating with in terms of how they look at this bill. Yes, they agree, everyone agrees that this is not what we thought we would get, and we thought we would be having something more, and not just exchanges from the last 1996. And there are serious implications there because, I mean, you know, we are having a brand new airport coming. How do you tell the people of Crown Point that we have displaced them and we have no jurisdiction over the airport? You know, so I think, you know, they're all sides, and I think we have to be able to respond to all sides. Let me read this Facebook comment. Everything should begin and end with equal status. Having established that position, we can then go on to speak about other things, inclusive of proportioning of resources. As we move forward, one key point is clearly defined and acceptable maritime boundaries of Tobago, and likewise that of Trinidad. When that is done, we can then determine what contribution to the national TNT wealth/resources is derived, say, from the then Tobago waters via drilling, etc. By so doing, we then could determine a more realistic percentage of the national purse to be allocated to Tobago annually. If we go down that road, if we go down the current line of annual allocation. Thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Rodney Pigott.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Angus. You're doing a wonderful job tonight. I just wanted to make some very quick points. One in reference to, I think Jason spoke about, this should have been more widely publicized to get young people on. First of all, Channel 5 is also streaming this, and there's over 100 persons there. Second of all, Tobago is still widely divided into parties. And many of our young people are in party houses. If this was a PNM-driven objective, you may have found that a great number of young people would have been on in their constituency, in their PNM parties. If it was P2P-driven, it would be a great number of young people in that platform. This is a non-partisan platform, and Tobago is not yet accustomed to non-partisan-driven political conversations. This is what CivilNet is attempting to help to modify. Secondly, while many persons may say, throw away the bill, many persons are saying that because Dr. Vaness James says throw away the bill, because Dr. Winford says throw away the bill. They're listening to people that know how to read the bill, know how to read the legalese, and know why they are saying throw away the bill. When you challenge those people as to whether or not they even have read the bill, because Jason just said he didn't even read it yet. So if you challenge those persons, have you read the bill? Do you even know what's in the bill? A lot of persons cannot read the legalese, the contractual type of language that is in that bill. A person like Brendan, who heads an insurance company, he deals with contractual language day in, day out. The average person does not. The average person does not know what is in this bill and how to read it. They know the sound bites that have been driven by those who know what's in the bill. So what we are attempting to do is to try to explain it in layman's language so that those persons, when they say throw away the bill and they're asked why, they can say, because this clause I don't agree with, that clause I don't agree with, and so forth and so forth. So this exercise is in fact valid on that point, in that we're trying to help persons to understand why they are echoing a throw away the bill. And it's not just because Dr. Banner says it or Dr. Winford said it, but because I know it, I understand it. That's why we're doing this. Thank you very much, Dr. Denise. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
My mic is back on.
Okay. All right. So yes.
Yes.
Doc-
Go ahead. Yes.
Let me just point out some things, because I think we gotten more general than specific as we were
Yes,
directing at the start.
absolutely.
And I think we need to just focus on some things. For example, Jason raised the issue of sports. And sports is included in the fourth schedule, which they says the THA can pass laws about. But what he's raising, the question of selection on national teams, that is an issue for the sporting bodies. For example, the TTFA and the cricket body and so on. So that I don't think those things will fall into that the THA can legislate about that, or the parliament can legislate about that. That is policy that what he's pointing to is a deficiency in the way our sports are organized and these sporting bodies carry on their business. Because over many years, you would have had people, in fact, this between the constitutional bill and the THA bill here that is now proposed by the JSC, they talk about considering how much money is to be given to Tobago, and one of the factors inside here, they said, is the ability to have access to sporting and other facilities in Trinidad. So if that is a problem, there's supposed to be a government and an overall national sporting policy. Why hasn't that addressed that problem over all these years? Access to sporting facilities. So these are issues, some of them connected but not directly with the bill. When you come to the question of the bill and what this bill is, as we saw last night, there are things in this bill coming out of the JSC that have been removed from what went into the JSC, and also that have taken out from the THA Act, which has recently been amended simply to put 15 people rather than 12 and do a mathematical solution to a big political issue. So one of the things that has come out of this, of the THA Act, is that definition of Tobago, where the 6 mile limit was there. It is no longer there, and you restricted to the closing lines. So once you get out of what is defined as, let's say, Store Bay, the closing line would go across what is the dividing line going across Store Bay. Once you cross that line, if you're swimming too well, then you're in no man's land. And not the real no man's land, but in waters that are not defined in the law. So when you come to the Dispute Resolution Commission, which was in the THA Act, which is now replaced by this Financial
Mediation Committee.
Committee, you have a committee that moves from 5 independent people to a committee that is headed by the Minister of Finance. It was the ERC was headed by the Ombudsman or somebody of judicial qualification. Right. So now you're moving into a committee headed by the Minister of Finance, and on which the cabinet will have a majority.
No, the mediation committee is not the Minister of Finance.
He's talking about the Fiscal Review Commission.
The Fiscal Review Commission. Okay. Yes, the Fiscal Review. Yes, yes, the Fiscal Review Commission.
It is performing that function.
Yes.
And Tobago is now, I don't know how, based on what is in this bill that is coming out of the JSC, how is Tobago going to make a proposal to the cabinet with respect to the budget? Because it says you are allowed 6.5% or thereabouts of the national budget, right? No, the question is Right. Now, how do you present? Now, under the THA Act, you present a budget to the cabinet. And then they do their thing and go to the parliament and allocate you money. So you actually have a budget beforehand. Under this provision, you will now have to have a budget after the parliament passes a budget. So these are practical things that are further eroding whatever little autonomy existed under the THA Act.
Well, I mean, is it eroding? I mean, in that area, would you have more autonomy, whether they give you the money en bloc and you then decide how you want to reallocate your funds that you've been given? Because right now you have to produce a draft estimate that goes down, and then they tell you what votes they want to put things in and whatnot. And perhaps this way, they decide how much money you're getting and they send your monies. And then within a month, you decide how you want to allocate those monies within the different votes. So I think that piece, I would applaud that piece. Perhaps we need to have a shift.
Arriving at the figure for Tobago?
6.8%, yes?
No, because the previous figure they never gave you. So how are they going to arrive at it now?
What do you mean the previous figure they never gave?
You were getting a thing that was averaging, what was it, 4 point something?
4.03%.
Right.
Correct.
Now, and you were submitting a budget beforehand for
Yes.
Tobago, right?
Correct.
Now you're submitting nothing, and they are giving you a figure. And
yes.
With arriving at that figure, there are certain stipulations in the bill as to how they arrive at the figure. So it doesn't have an input from Tobago that as exists now.
So
beforehand.
Well, I don't know. I was of the understanding, and perhaps Dr. Varnas can clear that up as the economist, from reading the bill, that if we wanted additional funds, that is when they would decide how they go about determining we wanted additional funds over the 6.8%. But according to what my understanding is that they determine 6.8% of the national budget goes to Tobago. Tobago gets that. And after Tobago gets the amount of money, within a month, Tobago has to prepare and go into the House to debate and get the budget approved for Tobago. They're not asking you to do draft estimates anymore to go to Trinidad for them to tell you what you're going to get and what you're not going to get in which foods. So, Dr. Varnas?
Okay, I will answer that, but let me make one comment on what Clyde was saying in relation to what Jason asked. And that comment is that, Clyde, there's a connection between what he's raising about sports and the fifth schedule, because you create the sports persons in Tobago in the education system before you get all the way to what these sports bodies are administering. We nurture our sports people in the education system, in the schooling system. And the schooling policy is made by the central government under the fifth schedule. Now, Tobago just administers. So if they cook up an education system that retains what we have today, Tobago doesn't have the right to reform and create an education system in Tobago that would achieve what Jason wants, which is development of competitive capacity in Tobago to compete with Trinidad successfully and beat them. He can't get that through sports policy. He has to get that through the redesign of our education system so that between 6 and 16, a dimension of our education system could produce elite sports people with the capacity to do what Dwight York could do, and more Dwight Yorks. Thanks to Bertil Sinclair, we got that one with Wendell Mwanden. But that you could get through a properly reformed education system in which you have skill-intensive education. And so if we can, just hold on, Doc.
Quick question, quick question on the education, right? Yeah. You know, I noticed that we had education under administration, but we don't have it under Tobago laws.
Exactly.
Can we reform the system without having the Tobago laws on education to back it up?
That's my point. The design of the system is still going to take place in Trinidad, and we'll just administer what they want. And therefore, we can never achieve the goal for Arthur, for Fraser, even if sports policy is in the fourth schedule. With that, so that said, with respect to the budget, the 6.8% in this bill has no economic rationale whatsoever. It's purely gratuitous and really has very little to do with autonomy. If you want Tobago to have self-determination, you have to fix a formula in the Constitution. So we never have to go ask any Fiscal Review Commission or the Minister of Finance or the Prime Minister for any favors. We have a fixed formula. The nation makes a decision on what the budget is. Tobago gets a fixed share. That fixed share will have to be based on the DRC rules, the Dispute Resolution Commission principle. For the recurrent budget, the 4.03% was an equal share for all citizens for the recurrent spending. And for the development spending, you need the boundaries in order to follow standard good practice, best practice in the international community. You take the mean of the population share and the geographical area, the geographical share of Tobago. And that mean is what will define the development share, as you see it done in New York City and in other parts of the world, in New York State and New York City and other parts of the world. So the 6.8% has no rationale. There is no way to justify it economically as far as I'm concerned. And you cannot define autonomy as a condition under which the Prime Minister gets to dominate a committee that decides if Tobago gets more than 6.8%. So we're all discussing autonomy when all is said and done. And that provision in the law is alien to the notion of autonomy.
Okay, so I will read a comment and then I will have Aldrin speak. Good night. As a former national footballer, Tobagonians are at a disadvantage because of different reasons. One, selection, and most critical, you cannot receive an international football contract unless you play 50% of your country's national games, and most Tobagonians are not given that opportunity. Okay, we go to Aldrin.
Hi, good night, everyone. The discussion is very interesting. I have one question, and the question, I heard Jason said that he picked up a copy of this bill that is presented to us now. Where can someone pick up the bill?
I believe the Tobago legislature should be able to have those bills available.
And may I interject? All the assemblyman office in the constituencies have copies to be distributed.
Okay. And will this program, will this forum, will it continue after tonight? Because I think we really need this.
Okay. Initially, this program was supposed to be 3 days, you know, so we really have the time to ventilate the issues. However, with the Joint Select Committee coming this weekend, we felt that we should do it for 2 days, and then the Joint Select Committees, they are having their consultations tomorrow, Friday, and Saturday. And I believe, I'm not sure if the THA is also having a session at some point on Monday. I think the Tobago CivilNet organizers, the volunteers, will come together and make a decision whether they feel putting on some extra sessions in the upcoming week may be helpful. So of course, leave your comments, you know, whether you feel strongly about it, and they should be able to decide at the end of the day whether they will add some more sessions next week. Thank you for your comments.
Madam Chair.
Yes, So,
Yes, you had called on me earlier, but I wasn't able to take
Mr.
my
Green
call.
Tours, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, someone had commented in the Facebook comments about the effect this bill could have environmentally, and that is what I wanted to comment on. Now, in 1970, we got what we call the Preservation Act. And in the Preservation Act, certain coordinates are highlighted that points out the area that is protected, the marine area that is protected here in Tobago, and it includes the Bonaccord Lagoon, which could be argued as being inland, and it also includes within those same coordinates, Buku Reef, which is definitely offshore to the rest of Tobago. So when we have the definition that states this is how much marine territory applies to Tobago, with that definition, you now know exactly who protects this protected marine area. It's the Tobago House of Assembly. In the absence of that, it would obviously fall on central government. And if it falls on central government, that to me is a very scary situation, because we all remember the Sandals situation, and I'm not 100% certain that what was attempted in the case of Sandals was fully legal.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green Tours.
Dr. Denise Green,
Vanessa, let me
Tobago
ask you
Tours.
one thing.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I want to ask you one thing. You spoke about the 6.8%, and there's no basis for it. And that's the number in terms of the income. What about the framework for, if we had to agree, okay, whatever number that they come with, if they choose to have the formula that you're recommending, do you agree to the process of them sending the money to Tobago, where we don't have to present anything, that it comes, and that is the time that we decide how we want to treat with our monies?
Well, that in a way that would be a detail, because if I know that I am entitled to 5% of the recurrent budget of the country and 32% of the development budget fixed in the Constitution, my job as the Secretary of Finance and his team would be to forecast the budget of the country. And once I forecast, with my borrowing powers and so on, I can define the budget of Tobago, treat the monies coming from Trinidad whenever they come as a contribution to the budget that I am going to define based on my borrowing and other sources of income. And therefore, the issue of how the money flows will be just a technical detail. It's not life and death for us. The critical skill we are going to need is in a fixed formula, is the capacity to forecast the level of revenues and expenditures for the country. And you'll be up or down, as the case might be. You live with the errors of a normal forecast, but your life, it goes on autonomously. That would be the best way to answer that question.
Just breaking it down for persons out there, in the past or currently, what obtains is the fact that the Tobago House of Assembly members, they go into the House, they debate a draft estimate that then goes to Trinidad, and persons would normally say that's a wish list because you're not getting whatever you ask for. And it goes to Trinidad. Trinidad, through a series of consultations with them, would then determine how much Tobago is getting in their allocation of 4.03%. It comes back to Tobago, and then they hold another debate to determine, okay, we didn't get what we wanted. They're holding another debate to determine how this money is now reallocated. So what the bill is doing is actually cutting out that extra step where, like you said, they will get their monies, and then after getting the money, they decide how they're allocating the funding and prioritizing.
May I add to that very important point that what the current arrangements allow is bad budgeting practice on behalf of the nation in Tobago. The THA doesn't have to budget with any discipline whatsoever. It doesn't have to forecast the budget. It doesn't do it. It should, but it doesn't do it. And the heart and soul of that is that it spends only what the central government approves. But if you have autonomy, that is not going to be true anymore. You're going to be able to borrow under Tobago House of Assembly discipline, not the Minister of Finance having anything to do with your right to borrow. You're going to have to define your discipline with respect to borrowing as a Tobago government, and in that, and under the jurisdiction of the representatives of the people of Tobago. And in that context, you'll be in a position to budget with discipline, because now you are only guaranteed an amount tied to the Constitution, or an amount that reflects the level of discipline you exercise with respect to borrowing and other revenue sources you will generate.
So let me ask you this: on the international front, if Tobago having its autonomy and being able to make the laws, if they are borrowing, would those debts be then reflected as Tobago debt or as the national debt?
Well, different agencies will treat these things in different ways. In the context of the US, for example, the national debt is the debt of the federal government. The state debt is the state debt, and they're responsible for their own debt. If you're running a real democracy in Trinidad and Tobago has real autonomy, it will be transparent to everybody who you go to borrow money from, that your debt is your local debt as against the debt of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, especially if it's a federal government of Trinidad and Tobago. Other agencies will consider all of it, because they may say, you may encourage them to think that your debt is a contingent liability for the central government. But the law should make it clear that Tobago's debt is Tobago's debt, and it's not a debt of the national government.
Okay, let's take this. Follow-up. It says, Dr. Tsoiafatt-Angus, you mentioned the THA's financial discipline. Does the second bill put sufficient measures in place to facilitate this discipline? Let me let Mr. Weatherhead answer this one. Mr. Weatherhead?
What happened under finance, under the Tobago Island Government Bill 2021?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it speaks of the 6.8%. But if you are to get 1 cent more than 6.8%, the process will be decided by the Fiscal
Review Commission. Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. If you don't have a budget up front, what are you going to the commission with? You can't go and just say, I want 7%, just so. So that is the problem. And then when you are allowed to borrow, and you are allowed to have investments, and those investments are not to be managed by the Tobago Island government. They are to be managed by the central bank on behalf of the Tobago Island government. The borrowing, from my reading of the bill, these two bills here, it doesn't make it clear what Tsoiafatt-Angus was just discussing there about where is this going to be accounted for in terms of whether it's national debt or Tobago debt. It is not clear in the act.
All right. Dr. Winford, does the second bill put sufficient measures in place to facilitate the discipline on the financial of the THA?
There's no
the finances
measure
of the THA.
Well, there is no measure that I remember that is in the new bill that promotes discipline, financial discipline on the part of the House of Assembly. If anybody has noted something that I have missed, they must tell me that.
Well, yes, because Dr. Winford, as part of the new bill, you have a number of committees which are supposed to provide the oversight of the assembly, and they, it's certainly more than what was there before in terms of requesting the island government to report to the legislature before, once the debate on the budget is done, then they really have no need to come back to the house. But I know that, you know, there are some areas there where they are, you know, forced to come back to the house and report, especially if they go into the contingencies fund. I think they have to come to the house and report those activities.
But
In
Dr. Denise,
theory,
let me see if I can give the question a straight answer, based on having read every detail in this, these two bills. The straight answer to the question posed by the attendee is no. There are two reasons for that. The oversight mechanisms that are put in place in this bill cannot work. They cannot deliver oversight. Oversight means oversight of the Executive Council. The Premier will have the capacity to set up an Executive Council that is immune to oversight, because it could make an Executive Council of 18 members out of the 25. And so the next 7 can oversee 18. They will always be outvoted on everything. It is impossible for that to happen. And secondly, the committees, there are 4 committees. 2 are defined, the Public Accounts and the Public Administration and so on Accounts Committee. And these 2 are complemented by 2 more that are really not defined. Not defined, the Financial Committee and the Omnibus Committee. They are not defined. If you think about it, they're saying 2 for the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee and 2 for the Public Accounts Committee. 6 members, 4 to 6 members for each of those 2. That's already, say, 8 members. All the Chief Secretary has to do is set up an Executive Council with 17 members to dominate those 2. So they can't oversee. And then if you put 2 more, and you said as the Premier, what you're going to do is you're going to pick 12, then you do not have enough non-executive members in order to make up effective oversight committees. Oversight is a real process with real work. And so, so I think the answer technically and intuitively, having read the bill, is no, there is not enough capacity in this to oversee any aspect, including the financial aspects of the work of the Executive Council.
The arithmetic bonus doesn't work out.
The arithmetic doesn't work, exactly.
Okay, I want to just read a comment here before I hand it over to Mr. Green. Federalism is not only good for Tobago, but great for Trinidad as well. Federalism seeks to allow power from community up, give voice and protection to minority groups in a society, allow harmony in diverse cultures such as ours, and therefore is best for our plural society, and more importantly, keep a reins on the executive, keeping them in check. The other statement is, or question, what happens if the overwhelming view of Tobago isn't in favor of this bill? What is next? And I'll leave that for you all to answer afterwards. Mr. Green.
Hi, good night, and it's Miss Green.
Oh, Miss Green, I'm so sorry.
Okay. I want to thank the CivilNet, Tobago CivilNet, for the opportunity of having this amazing platform and event, non-partisan. But I want to highlight something that is, I don't want to be an alarmist, of course. We're intelligently sorting through this bill that we've been handed to discuss. And while Tobago covers, I think, a little over 100 square miles from end to end, and what concerns me is the shrinking of Tobago. It covered 100 square miles, but it seems that Tobago, this bill seeks to shrink Tobago from those 100 square miles. And this is what I'm looking at. The airport is now going to be under central government. So the airport is no longer belonging to central government, THA, nor the people of Tobago. The seaport is going to be privatized eventually. These are the plans we're hearing. So 2 of your ports, well, your only ports are going to be taken away from Tobago, THA, the people of Tobago being able to have any decision directly over what is happening at the ports. And I think anybody who has a knowledge of strategy understands what a crippling effect that has on any nation. Tobago is not a nation in itself, but any territory that wants to be able to take care of itself and monitor itself properly. And this is for the illegal importation of guns and drugs, human trafficking, all of these things. They're now going to be under central government. And we know that not even the southern port in Point Lisas is under central government. So I'm concerned. I'm seeing Tobago having 100 square miles, but what I'm actually hearing is that Tobago is going to be cut up into 15 constituencies, and then Tobago is going to be shrunk back. And my question is, does that mean that that's 6.08, I think it is, of the national budget that is going to be handed to, pardon?
6.8.
6.8% of the national budget is going to be handed to Tobago. Will it eventually be a non-issue? Because if Tobago has no reason to have money to spend, since everything is going to be eventually, this is my perception, going to be placed on the central government, what would Tobago need money for? So that's my concern.
Thank you for that, Ms. Green. Thank you for that. Let me.
Dr. Denise, can I quickly
yes,
give Ms. Green
go
an
right
answer?
ahead.
Tobago will need money in order to invest in the capacity to compete with Trinidad as a starting point. It will need money to invest in the capacity to compete in the world. And whatever the central government does, and I know you have a certain kind of cynicism in the question you asked, but whatever the central government does, that problem is not going to go away. It's been here with us for 137 years. And every round, we as a people confront it face to face. We face it in dependence on Trinidad. It's galling, it's troubling to us. And we tend to come every round, we come back to trying to solve it. So that wouldn't go away. We will need money to fix ourselves, regardless of what this and any other bill says.
We will also need money to break away from the dependency syndrome in which we find ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay. It says, comment as it refers to the Joint Select Committee, public consultations. This week, their consultation is coming this weekend. I believe the public can email our objections to the draft bill to this address. Even a 2-line objection can be enough, though I know there are quite a few more than just 2. PARL101@ttparliament.org. Okay. What happens if the overwhelming view of Tobago isn't in favor, or if the overwhelming view of Tobago isn't in favor of this bill? What is next? Let's get Dr. Winford.
It would seem to me if that is highly hypothetical, Dr. Denise. But if that were to be the case, then that would signal to the government in Trinidad and Tobago that Tobago wants to maintain the status quo with some kind of superficial adjustments and improvements. But that would signal that Tobago would want to continue embracing a status quo in which they are not able to govern themselves. They are not able to make laws for the better management of the island. They are not able to compete with Trinidad and the rest of the world as we think our children are dreaming of, and we hopefully our grandchildren as well. So that's a simple answer, but it's highly hypothetical. Perhaps wishful, Dr. Denise?
No. I think they're saying what happens if the overwhelming view of Tobago isn't in favor of this bill?
Yes.
What is next?
And I'm saying that clearly speaks to a maintenance of the status quo. What exists now? with a vengeance, by the way, Dr. Denise. It would come with a vengeance. And the minority, of course, will be driven into deeper mires of frustration.
No, I think, so you're saying that we should go with the bill because—
No, you are asking me if, oh, maybe I misunderstood.
I think you misunderstood.
I
What
thought
they're
what you
saying
are
is—
saying to me is that the overwhelming majority of Tobagonians favor the bill. You're saying
No,
they
no, no.
disfavor it.
If they don't
Okay.
favor the bill, what next?
The question
So,
is, how can we bend the government to our will? Would government listen to the voice of Tobagonians in that sense? And if they don't, must we go and take it from them?
I think the bigger question is, are Tobagonians willing to come together to speak with one voice on this issue?
Well,
that
how are we going
is
to
the
know
real
that they
question.
are overwhelmingly against the bill, except they have come together? To be overwhelmingly against it suggests that there is a certain solidarity that has developed.
Well, I think that is why we are doing these sessions. That is why we're hoping persons would email the parliament with their concerns. That is why we are hoping persons would take the time to fill out the survey, which has been released by the parliament.
But the survey would not, the responses to the survey will not speak to the issue of overwhelming rejection. The survey cannot speak to the business of overwhelming, because there are many issues that are not treated in the survey.
Correct, but at the end of the
survey is one way of gauging people's reaction.
Right. At the end of the survey, they also ask, do you want to send in a position or a, some kind of comments in addition to just ticking the boxes? So, this is a conversation, and it is really a conversation to get people involved, to make them feel as if they could even make a decision and send forward their comments.
But we could go forward on the hypothetical notion that you put to me. If in fact most people disagree with the bill, disfavor it, reject it, then they would be speaking with one voice, so to speak. A unanimous kind, no, not almost unanimous, but from what I'm getting from you. The question is, even in the face of that, would the government bend and give Tobago what it wants? And if it does not bend, should Tobago now take up more serious objections? Should Tobago, for example, take up arms? Should we go to something as extreme as that?
Maybe we should get the lawyer to come in here.
Yeah, let me hear what
Maybe we should get the lawyer.
Yeah.
This morning there was an interview. There was an interview on TTT this morning with the Tobago West MP, who is a member of the DJSC. And she was saying, literally, if people don't agree with this bill, we will see what we could tweak on it. But if there's nothing that we could fix to make people happy, we will go back into another decade of consultation and so on and so on. I think that was an attempt to intimidate the people of Tobago, to say you have to agree to this thing. And she says we could pass it and then fix it a little bit and so on. In other words, what the people of Tobago sent us, they kept telling the whole country, this is the result of widespread consultation. This is what Tobago wants.
But that's the other side of the coin, Clyde. You're talking about if people now somehow accept the bill with PNM prompting.
Well, I'm saying,
yeah,
that's what the PNM is pushing for.
Yes, but I'm still on the question of what we should do if we overwhelmingly reject the bills. That's a different concern all entirely. What
they are trying to do is to prevent that overwhelming rejection.
No, but I'm not getting there. I'm seeing this as a hypothesis, a hypothetical situation. It's not real.
You're trying to answer Dr. Denise's question.
Precise.
No. The question from the chat room.
Yeah, the question from the chat room, right?
Right.
Yes.
that you brought to the panel's attention. I'm saying one of the options is to take up arms. If the government refuses to yield to the democracy that has taken place, right? Well, one of the options, hypothetically, of course, is to get involved in violent reaction. to the government, to the tyranny of the government. But this is all hypothetical, Dr. Angus.
But
Okay,
Clyde,
well,
Clyde,
Mr.
have you given me a
Bikari.
full answer? I wanted to hear your full answer.
Well, the thing is, if that is their position, if people are really opposed to the bill, and that's what I said last night, the only way people can express that is collectively. And we have to find the ways to do that, given the difficulties. And we have more lockdown now than yesterday. So how do you...
Do we take to the streets, Clyde? Do we smash buildings, public buildings, storefronts?
You don't necessarily have
Do
to
we
smash
burn
any
cars? This is what happens in the rest of the world.
Let me take this back a little bit because, if persons are so inclined, petitions have been very effective. Persons are getting with the technology to do petitions online. But let me read Mr. Bikari's comment. All against the bill never can happen. The means simply isn't there to generate or acquire a mobilized community on an intellectual subject like this. Food security maybe, but not a further term issue. And Ms.
I am not talking
Giselle
about reality,
Gypsy
Dr.
says,
Denise.
how do you see the people coming out, resisting and objecting too much when the country is locked down hard for another month? Mr. Piggott? Okay. Mr.
I
Green
can get
Tobago
my turn
Tours.
on the question.
Let me do this one. I wonder if people realize Ms. Green is warning us that if Tobago is losing all our authority over Tobago by reason of this bill, our finances will soon follow. Okay, Dr. Vanas.
If the people of Tobago block this bill successfully, they'd be doing a favor to the nation. Because if this bill passes, it is going to trigger the development of a movement to secession and the breakup of the country. So the PNM itself ought to be very thoughtful about what victory in this matter will mean for the nation, if they care about the nation at all. If Tobagonians succeed in blocking the bill, then what it signals to me is that we now have to go to ourselves, and in a constitutional setting, in the setting of good governance, that means turning to the 12 representatives we have just elected. In defiance of logic, we found a way to elect 6 and 6 and defy the logic of apathy and all of those things. And what we should, as a people, if we could find the courage to reject the bill, we should also find the courage to demand of the 6 and 6 that they cook up a bill whenever they form the assembly, and lay out in the spirit of self-determination what bill you want to express your self-determination in relation to the relationship with Trinidad. Lay that out. Lay out your constitutional reform, in other words, and take that to Trinidad and lobby that. That's the meaning of self-determination. And that will be the next best logical step for the people of Tobago.
And if they are resisting at that point, Dr. Vanas?
Well, I was about to ask.
If after
they do all of that, the government stands firm.
No, but you're getting far. What if they can't even get into the room to discuss what Tobago needs?
Well, that's
the 6 and the 6
can't equal 12.
That's a sociology we have. You can't prescribe right. If the sociology gives you a situation in which neither of the groups of 6 understand how to let's fix our government in Tobago, we're in big trouble as a people. I am not sure that is the scenario we face. We just came out of an election in which the people of Tobago defeated bad expectations and delivered what we are working on now. I think
the chair, Vanas, wants us to take it to the logical end.
Well, I don't want to go down the road of despair. I think Tobago can fix this problem.
No, but I think, we need to start looking realistically at what we could do. Okay, fine. Tobago rejects the bill. How long is it going to take to accomplish what you are suggesting, Dr. Vanas?
It doesn't take long. They can, the 12 can form the assembly next week or week after.
Okay.
And then they can write a simple autonomy bill in 3 months. They can take that in consultation with the people. They can take that autonomy bill to Trinidad. Both sides go down there and get the work done to persuade Trinidad that this simple bill. Now it's not gonna be this all this detailed stuff they have. This simple bill.
You are convinced that a process that took more than 15 years of consultations, 5 years at the Joint Select Committee, all of that, we can now get this accomplished within a year.
Once you understand what you're really doing, if you're talking a simple bill, you're not talking these complex.
No, I want you to. I want you to be able to explain.
I'm answering you. I'm saying yes.
Yes, to explain to the people so they understand clearly.
Exactly. In the 2016 bill, after all the years of the work with John Prince and so on, you have an enormous amount of expression of a fundamental misunderstanding of what good governance really is. A simple autonomy bill is simply a bill of rights, nothing more. It doesn't have anything to do with the governance arrangements and so on. It's a bill of rights, the most complicated component of which will be the provisions for a fixed formula in the Constitution to finance Tobago's future. That's all. It doesn't require all of these shenanigans. The governance arrangements of Tobago will be left under autonomy to the people of Tobago to work out. That will take more than 6 months. But in 3 months, we could put a simple autonomy bill that both sides of the parliament could agree on. 3 months with a simple set of provisions for Tobago's rights. Rights to this, rights to that, rights to the other, you're done. Define Tobago and you're done.
It will take less than 3 months, Van.
Absolutely. Once you're done with that, I don't see it taking more than 3 months to go down to Trinidad with goodwill on both sides in Tobago.
It's how Trinidad responds at that point.
Let me speak to our legal representative as to whether this is realistic. 3 months coming up with a bill, crafting a bill, designing, whatever. Because I know these lawyers somehow take some time to do what they need to do.
The thing is, you see, this thing has been left too long in the hands of lawyers. I remember coming to a discussion in Tobago when Deborah Moore and they had organized this meeting. And what's his name? He's a senior counsel. He had drafted something for them. Russell Martino.
Martino.
Right? And what he drafted was a bullet point document outlining certain issues that autonomy would have involved, similar to what Vanessa is saying. Now, the question of outlining what, as Vanessa puts it, a Bill of Rights in that sense is, this is what we of Tobago, we want to be in control of this. That shouldn't take very long, but the parliament is going to insist that what we need to do is to put all these very detailed things in place. Now that is part of the discussion of getting what you want to come true. That's not part of preparing it. It is how you're going to get them to accept it.
But it swings on the acceptance of Parliament.
Yes.
That's the point.
If when we, as the people of Tobago, who seek autonomy, set out a simple bill for both sides of the parliament to respect the rights of the people of Tobago, and we take it to Trinidad, if the PNM say no, we penalize them in the next election here in Tobago, for sure. It is difficult for me to conceive, I must say, for me to conceive of a UNC that behaved the way it behaved between 2010 and 2015 to reject any notion that the people of Tobago are entitled to simple rights. Simple rights. So that's why I feel confident that if we put together a simple Bill of Rights for Tobago, it has a better chance of passing the House, both houses for that matter, than this complicated bill, this colonizing bill that the government has put forward here, and this dangerous bill that threatens to break up the country. I think a simple Bill of Rights will not threaten to break up the country. It will help Trinidad to understand how it could develop.
I think that's the more material point, that last point, Banner. Bears repeating.
So I see you're getting some support, Dr. Vanas. So, Mr. Bikari says a sitting pro-Tobago THA can expedite a bill with goodwill on both sides.
A simple bill. If it's not all of these complicated stuff about the way to set up the government and so on. It's for us in Tobago to sit down and argue over for a year and a half. And we go back to the polls in 2023 or something like that. But the autonomy component, the amendment of the Constitution to recognize Tobago's right to self-determination and equal status with the rights that go along with those two things, that would be a mirror of the rights Trinidad should enjoy whenever it gets to the wisdom that Clyde was articulating.
Okay, let me take another comment. Sorry to cut you, Dr. Vanas. I want to take another comment before we close in 10 minutes. Mr. Piggott.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Vanas. Dr. Angus, I want to back up to a junction where you were making a very good point, and also Dr. Winford also made that same point. If in Party A, they actually support this bill or enough measures in this bill, and they encourage their constituents to stay off of Facebook. Don't get emotional, get on Facebook and make all kind of comments. Just fill out the Survey Monkey, respond to Parliament with your comments, send in letters and so forth that you support this bill. And let's say Party B, which may overwhelmingly denounce the bill and have spoken to Dr. Vanas and others how they want this bill to be thrown in the garbage, and are making all the comments on Facebook that they want this bill to be thrown in the garbage, but they do not fill out the Survey Monkey. They do not speak to Parliament. Parliament has no idea that they renounced this bill. They have not gone through the formal measures of speaking to Parliament, and all Parliament has is a bunch of responses that says we support this bill. This bill will pass because somebody's playing chess and somebody's playing checkers. And what CivilNet wants to do is to help us all to play chess. Understand the bill, understand why you reject the bill, and tell Parliament you reject the bill. Don't tell Dr. Banners you reject the bill. Don't tell Facebook you reject the bill. Tell Parliament you reject the bill in your overwhelming numbers so that we can then get this thing moved forward. That's the comment I want to make. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Xavier Edwards.
Hi, greetings. Thanks, Ms. D. And I just want to quickly share that I co-sign what Dr. Vanas James mentioned about the simplicity in a Bill of Rights. Sometimes we tend to overcomplicate simple processes. And I want to quote Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture, who said, "We had to come to the understanding that the majority of our people are unconscious, but not because they are unconscious doesn't mean they don't want freedom. People's lack of understanding of this bill, or even reading it, or the disenfranchised nature with politics as a whole that leads to them feeling like whatever, doesn't remove the fact that inside they want to feel a level of freedom within this interdependent nature and this interdependent nation. And the simple Bill of Rights will provide that sense of freedom within the interdependence. What's important is that the 12 elected representatives who have been elected by the constituents the people in their various constituencies, it would be very disheartening that they don't find that stability and that solidarity in the midst of something so simple and are fighting over, an executive position when we are faced with this problem that we all share, which, as both Dr. V. James and W. James mentioned, it could be solved simply, and then we move ahead and deal with our issues.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Xavier and Rodney. We have a few minutes left, and I will give each panelist a minute to wrap up. So, Dr. James Winford.
Mine is very simple. When you see people like Xavier Edwards has taken over the narrative that we have been pushing, Banos and I, there's a lot of hope. We just hope that there are more like Xavier who will take over the narrative and push it around this island of Tobago.
Thank you. Mr. Weatherhead?
Well, I think the issue is for Tobago to get together again and address this bill in a way that you want to see this thing happen. And for that to happen, the 6 and 6 who were elected by the people of Tobago have to act as their representatives. And people have to act together. And that is the only way you're going to get this done.
Dr. Vanas.
It's sufficient for me to agree with my esteemed colleagues and with you, Dr. Denise, that there is hope ahead. The 6 and 6 are the people that I look to in this modern era to solve this problem. I don't look to the Joint Select Committee. What they're looking to do is mash up the country. But what we will do in Tobago is demonstrate to them how this can be done in a civil, good governance framework.
So let me say thank you to our panelists, thank you to our audience, and all those who participated. It is important that regardless of what you think, that you fill out the SurveyMonkey survey that was sent out by Parliament. Find it from somewhere, somebody. You can message on Facebook to Tobago Civil Net, and they should be able to send you the link. It is very important for you to have your voice heard. We have 3 options on the table. One is to accept the bill as it is, or send in some recommendations, and hopefully the Joint Select Committee takes the suggestions on board. The second is that you actually reject the bill. And the other option, maybe it's 4 options. The other option is that you can request to go back to the 2016 bill that was signed off by many Tobagonians through the series of consultations, and it is very different from what we have now. And lastly, what has been put forward on the table is that we reject the bill, have all of the 12 assemblymen come together and put together a simple Bill of Rights that we champion to go down to Trinidad and then decide how we want to live our lives and be guided by our rules and regulations in the Tobago space. And so with that, I want to again urge you all to fill out the SurveyMonkey. We attempted to explain as many areas as possible, but if you do have questions on different areas, feel free to send your messages to either Parliament or to the Tobago Civil Net, and we will have those pieces answered. So again, thank you all so much, Dr. Vanas, Dr. James, and Mr. Weatherhead. Thank you so much for giving us your time tonight.
Thank you.
Very well.